They laughed at the single dad janitor's tattoo until he saved the bank CEO from armed robbers. If you're gonna mop the marble, at least try not to look like a secret agent while doing it. The words echoed through the gleaming lobby of Hawthorne Trust, followed by snickers from a pair of junior analysts in tailored suits. One of them, a kid barely out of college, pointed his coffee cup toward the janitor bent over near the revolving doors. I mean, seriously, look at that tattoo. What's that even supposed to be? Illuminati janitorial division? More laughter. Loud. Deliberate. But Caleb Shaw didn't flinch. He ran the mop in slow, deliberate strokes left to right, never missing an edge. His posture was steady, his shoulders square, the only movement coming from his arms. His gray janitor uniform hung loose, concealing a build too solid for someone pushing 50. And there, peeking just beneath the rolled-up sleeve of his right arm, was the thing they couldn't stop talking about: a sharp, intricate tattoo. An all-seeing eye encased within a 7-pointed star. Ink faded with time, but the design unmistakably deliberate. He looked up just once. Not at them, but at the security camera perched above the lobby doors. A flicker of tension passed through his brow. Then he went back to mopping. The lobby returned to its morning rhythm. High heels tapped across marble. Security guards checked IDs. Elevator chimes dinged with polite precision. No one noticed the man with the clipboard walk in through the side door. No one except Caleb. He didn't turn his head, but his hand paused mid-stroke. The man wasn't tall, wasn't imposing, but his eyes scanned the space with clinical awareness, flicking to exits, cameras, and vents. He walked past the reception desk without a glance, wearing the orange vest of a building inspector. No one questioned him. Caleb's jaw tensed. He recognized the body language. You don't forget how predators move. But instead of stepping forward or raising an alarm, he dipped the mop back into the bucket and continued. Across the lobby, 30 stories above, Diana Voss stood with her arms crossed and a look on her face that had turned stronger men into apologetic toddlers. Her assistant was mid-report, rattling off quarterly projections with an enthusiasm that didn't match the numbers. Diana didn't blink. She was used to problems arriving dressed as PowerPoints. Pull the plug on portfolio. Set 6, she said flatly. We're overexposed. But replace the offshore units with federal-backed bonds. Move quietly. But that'll trigger questions from people who don't know what they're doing. Exactly. Silence. Then a mumbled, "Yes, ma'am," and the assistant scurried off. Diana turned toward the massive window behind her, watching the city stretch out like a grid of promises waiting to break. From this height, everything looked manageable, even predictable. She liked predictable. Downstairs, Caleb emptied his mop bucket into the maintenance sink behind a steel door marked custodial. The room was small, quiet. He washed his hands slowly, eyes locked on his reflection. The fluorescent lighting caught the edges of the tattoo on his forearm, casting strange shadows across the sink. He ran a finger along the ink, then rolled his sleeve down. Always 3 turns. No more, no less. A voice crackled over the building's PA system. Attention, scheduled maintenance on the upper HVAC system will begin at 11:00 a.m. Access restricted to authorized personnel only. Caleb listened and frowned. There was no HVAC maintenance scheduled for today, he knew, because he was the one who usually unlocked that floor. He dried his hands, quietly opened a drawer near the sink. Inside, beneath a row of gloves and bleach bottles, was a key ring. 36 keys. Only 5 were labeled. His fingers hovered above the second unlabeled one. He took it. Back on the executive floor, Diana walked briskly through the corridor toward the boardroom. Her phone buzzed in her hand. An encrypted text from internal security: minor network fluctuations. Reviewing logs. She sighed. It had been a week of minor glitches, non-critical, easy to explain. But they were adding up. At the glass-walled elevator lobby, she caught her reflection. Impeccably pressed suit. Hair in a flawless bun. A woman who didn't make excuses and didn't give second chances. Then she noticed something. The elevator security panel flashed a yellow light. Minor fault. Diagnostics in progress. her brow furrowed. She tapped the side of her phone and called security. It rang and rang. No answer. That had never happened. Somewhere below, Caleb stood just outside the electrical control closet, listening. Not with his ears, but with his gut, the part of him that once read ambushes from the way a crow flew off a rooftop. Something was off. Too many signals. Too much silence. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin. Silver. Old. He turned it twice in his fingers, then slipped it into a side panel inside the closet wall. A green light blinked once, then died. That wasn't supposed to happen. He closed the panel and walked out calmly, as if nothing had changed. He passed by the elevator bay where two suited men stood waiting, joking about brunch. One of them turned, gave him a lazy smirk. "You missed a spot, buddy." Caleb met his eyes just for a second, and in that second something shifted. Not in the man, but in Caleb. A stillness, a decision. He didn't answer, just kept walking. At 10:57 a.m., the first system went offline. Security camera feeds blinked to black. At 10:59, the electronic locks failed. At exactly 11:00 a.m., the lights across 3 floors surged, then died. Silence followed. Then a crash. Screams. Somewhere far above on the executive floor, Diana Voss's phone buzzed again. But this time it wasn't a security update. It was a single message. "We're in." And down in the service corridor, Caleb Shaw took off his janitor badge, tucked it into his back pocket, and whispered 4 words, "Don't make me remember." You'd think someone with that tattoo would know how to sweep. The words cut through the morning like a dull knife through dry bread, meant to sting, not to slice. Laughter followed, bouncing off the polished marble of the 12th floor staff lounge. Caleb Shaw didn't respond. He kept his head down, pushing the industrial vacuum across the floor in even practiced rows. His movements were mechanical, measured like someone cleaning not just the floor, but the space between memories. Near the espresso machine, 2 junior analysts chuckled over their designer coffees. One of them, Marcus Klein, nudged his friend and nodded toward Caleb. "See it?" he whispered. "Just above the sleeve. My cousin's in the Navy. He says that kind of ink used to mean black ops or some secret clearance level." His friend rolled his eyes. "Yeah, and my uncle thinks the earth is flat. Come on, man, that guy's a janitor. He probably got that at a biker rally and forgot where he parked." They both laughed again. Caleb kept vacuuming. But just beneath his shirt collar, a single drop of sweat slid down the back of his neck, not from the heat, but from the pressure. He felt it again, that shift in the building's rhythm, a silence too deep to be normal, a kind of quiet that spoke louder than alarms. Across the bank's executive floor, Diana Voss stood by the floor-to-ceiling window in her corner office, watching a pigeon land awkwardly on a steel ledge outside. Its wings twitched as it settled. She admired that. Balance in motion. A knock at her door interrupted the moment. It was Martin Reyes, her CFO. Slick, always overdressed with teeth that gleamed more than his ideas. "Cybersecurity flagged a data lag this morning," he said. "Half a second delay in our transaction logs." And she replied, eyes not leaving the window. "Likely nothing. Routing glitch. But protocol says we escalate anomalies." Diana turned slowly. "Protocol also says you don't waste my time unless it's an actual breach." Martin raised both hands. "Just doing my job. You want to impress me, Martin? Fix the glitch." Quietly. No escalations, no drama. He nodded, retreated. She didn't watch him leave. Back in the janitor's supply room, Caleb opened the metal cabinet where bleach bottles stood like silent sentries. Behind them was a false panel. He reached inside and pulled out a narrow black case the size of a stapler. He didn't open it, just stared at it. The last time he'd touched this case, he was in another country, another life. A team of 6. 3 returned. 2 in pieces. 1 didn't make it past sunrise. He slid the case into his utility cart, then picked up his mop and returned to routine. By 10:15, the break room was buzzing with mid-morning energy barista-grade coffee-lazy gossip and the illusion of invincibility. At a corner table, a temp named Valerie was showing off a blurry phone photo to 3 interns. "This guy," she said, zooming in, Our janitor. I caught the tattoo when he was refilling the sanitizer dispensers. Like, what is that even? One intern squinted. Looks military. Or culty. I Googled it, Valerie said. Nothing comes up. Just forums talking about some conspiracy crap, Project Sentinel or some Ghost Protocol junk. The interns laughed. Maybe he thinks he's John Wick. More like John Mop. Someone snorted. They laughed harder. In the hallway just outside the door, Caleb stood still listening. Not with hurt, not with anger, but with the cold, clinical detachment of someone who had once lived in places where names were never spoken and silence was survival. He pushed the cart forward, turned the corner, and vanished into the next corridor without a sound. Meanwhile, Diana paced the tech operations floor with her hands clasped behind her back. Screens lined the walls, transaction streams, firewall monitors, live security feeds. She paused at one monitor flashing amber. Why is the executive elevator access offline? A tech looked up startled. That's not scheduled. Manual override unlikely. It requires dual authentication. Diana's eyes narrowed. Fix it. Back in the elevator shaft, 6 men dressed as utility contractors were ascending slowly via the emergency ladder. Each wore gear beneath their coveralls, lightweight armor, throat mics, wrist strap triggers. Their eyes were steady. Their silence was trained. One of them checked his watch. 11 sharp. Another nodded. Eyes up. The floor plan said 2-minute access to Vault Command from Stairwell 4. They climbed higher. Unaware of the shadows rising beneath them, the building went about its charade of safety. On floor 7, Caleb paused near a janitor's closet and glanced up. A faint, low-frequency hum reverberated through the metal air duct's wrong pitch. Wrong timing. He opened the closet, locked the door behind him, and tapped on the pipe twice, then 3 times like knocking on a memory. Inside the same cart he'd wheeled all morning was a folded schematic, full wiring and airflow layouts of Hawthorne Trust. Not the ones in the city records, the originals, the ones from when the bank was a federal data hub decades ago. He unfolded it with careful hands. Marked in pencil were 5 routes. He crossed out 3. Only 2 left. At 10:47 a.m., Diana entered the boardroom where senior executives waited with coffee and overconfidence. Martin was already seated, still wearing that smug look that made her fingers itch. "Let's make this quick," she said, taking her seat. "We're reviewing backup access to the server room," Martin started. "The relay pings have been inconsistent and we're seeing the lights flickered. For a breath. Then they died. Complete blackout. No buzz, no hum, no polite warning. Just silence. Then the monitors in the room blinked once, twice, and rebooted to static. From the hallway outside, a single word rang out. Clear. Gunmetal boots hit the tile. Caleb Shaw, 3 floors below, shut the false panel inside the utility corridor. His shirt was damp with sweat now, but his hands were steady. He reached into his case and pulled out a compact military-grade radio. Powered it up. No signal. He'd expected that. EMP dampener. He closed the lid and looked up toward the ceiling. And for the first time in 9 years, he spoke aloud softly as if to someone who wasn't there. "I never wanted to come back." He stepped into the darkness. At precisely 10:52 a.m., the lobby of Hawthorne Trust was quiet enough to hear the hum of the espresso machine as the last cappuccino hissed to life. A woman in a navy pantsuit smiled politely as she passed the security desk. "Printer's still down," she said, waving her visitor badge. The guard nodded, distracted by a crossword. "Third one today," he muttered. She stepped into the elevator and pressed 20. No one noticed the tiny black dot stitched into the collar of her blouse. A transmitter. No one noticed the way she held her purse rigid, 2 fingers tucked inside the lining where the safety toggle sat ready. Except Caleb. He saw her from the second-floor maintenance overlook, crouched behind a supply duct, eyes following every movement in the lobby below. That's how he survived the first career, by watching what others ignored. And that woman. She was no bank client. Caleb checked the timer on his watch. 7 minutes left. Elsewhere, Diana Voss was losing her patience. "Martin," she said coldly, "why is there a third unregistered floor access today?" Martin Reyes looked pale beneath the boardroom's emergency lights flickering like a dying heartbeat. Could be a misread. Bad badge ping. Happens sometimes. "No, it doesn't," she snapped. "Not on my floor. Not with this timing." He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're being paranoid." Diana stepped closer, voice lowered. "I made my career betting on patterns no one else saw. I'm not paranoid. I'm precise." Before Martin could reply, a low rumble vibrated through the walls, faint like a throat clearing beneath the foundation. It wasn't thunder. Caleb moved fast now. He reached a junction in the sublevel corridor where old utility schematics branched like arteries. To the left, access to the freight elevator control. To the right, the emergency stairwell no one had used in years. He paused. A sound echoed behind him, rubber soles against concrete. Quick, purposeful. Not security. Not a civilian. He stepped into shadow, back pressed to the wall. The figure turned the corner. Mid-30s. Buzz cut. Bulked shoulders under a gray technician's shirt. No name tag. Eyes scanning fast. No hesitation. He passed within 3 feet of Caleb and never saw him. Caleb held his breath. Waited. Counted 6 full heartbeats. Then turned the other direction and moved. Upstairs, the boardroom's glass wall trembled as a soft thud echoed down the hallway. Not loud, but wrong. Diana turned her head sharply. Martin reached for his phone. No signal, he muttered. From the hallway, muffled voices south quadrant clear. Her breath caught. That wasn't one of her team's voices. She stepped toward the door, but a new sound stopped her, the unmistakable click of a safety being disengaged. From inside the room, she turned slowly. 3 chairs down, Kevin Lang, the assistant director of facilities, stood up, hands raised. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "They have my family." Then he pulled a sidearm from beneath the conference table. Back in the narrow emergency stairwell, Caleb emerged onto floor 4, unlit, eerily still. He moved along the wall, brushing fingertips against familiar surfaces. His steps made no sound. He heard the static before he saw the body. A guard. Young. Probably 23. Pulse still fluttering, unconscious. A dart in his neck. Caleb knelt checking vitals. Alive, but out cold. Then he heard it. Click, click. 2 slow steps behind him. He stood, turned. A man stood in the hallway, older, leaner, hollow eyes. The kind of man who'd been behind too many doors marked authorized only. His voice was low, familiar, dangerous. "Well, damn," he said. "Caleb Shaw. Thought you were dead." Caleb didn't blink. "You're 2 minutes early." The man smiled. "Didn't think you'd be here. I'm not." A beat passed. Then they moved. On floor 20, Diana ducked as the first shot cracked across the boardroom. The bullet embedded in the far wall. Kevin Lang didn't fire again. He just stood there, trembling, breaking apart. Diana didn't scream. She walked, not ran. Walked slowly, directly toward him. "I know fear," she said, voice steady. "I've stared it down in every boardroom from here to D.C. You want to shoot me? Then do it. But don't you dare blame your family." Kevin's hand shook harder. "Put it down," she said, closer now. "Be the man your kids think you are." He exhaled, then dropped the weapon. The doors burst open a second later. 2 armed men in black rushed in, shoved Kevin to the ground, and began zip-tying the rest of the executives. Diana stood still, watching, calculating. 3 floors down, Caleb's breath was shallow now. The fight hadn't lasted long, 7 seconds, maybe 8. His left shoulder burned, dislocated. The man he'd fought was unconscious at his feet, but the transmitter in the man's collar, still blinking. Caleb yanked it loose, crushed it under his boot, and pulled the man's security badge. "Thank you," he muttered, then headed to the service elevator shaft. The enemy was already inside the walls. which meant the only way out was deeper in. In the Vault Operations Center, a young analyst named Jody crouched beneath her desk, her fingers white around a silent walkie. She whispered, "Can anyone hear me?" Anyone. There was only static, until suddenly a voice cut in deep and calm. "If you're still breathing, stay low. I'm coming." Jody froze. Who is this? But the voice was already gone. Only silence remained. But in that silence, she did exactly what it told her to. She stayed low. Because sometimes, even in the middle of terror, a voice like that, calm, certain, unfazed, meant everything. It meant hope. There was no warning, no blaring alarm, no countdown, no flickering red light. Just silence. Then darkness. It swept through the building like a breath held too long. Every bulb, every screen, every humming sign of safety blinked out at once. Floor by floor, the skyscraper hushed itself. Elevators froze. Card readers went dead. Thermostats stalled mid-cycle. Phones dropped their signals. And on the 20th floor, where suits once debated dividends and mergers, the emergency backup lighting failed to come on. For a heartbeat, the most secure private bank in downtown Chicago became a coffin of glass and steel. And in that breathless pause between power and panic, someone spoke. Showtime. Diana Voss didn't scream. She didn't duck. She turned. Two masked figures moved into the boardroom like ink across white linen, silent fluid armed. Automatic rifles raised visors down. They swept the room with military precision, barking no orders, making no noise. The air changed. Martin Reyes stumbled backward, knocking over a carafe of cold brew. It shattered, scattering glass and fear. Kevin Lang still lay flat on the floor, zip-tied tears streaking his cheeks. One of the intruders reached for Diana. She didn't flinch. "I assume this is not a merger negotiation," she said, voice like frost. He grabbed her by the arm. "On your knees." She didn't move. "You'll want to check your tone," she whispered. "You're on camera." "No," he replied. "We're not." Then he tapped his belt, and the last trace of light in the room vanished. Downstairs in the heart of the building, Caleb Shaw slipped through a maintenance corridor that hadn't seen use in a decade. His shoulder ached from the earlier fight. He'd popped it back in without a sound, years of habit making pain feel like background noise. The emergency power grid had been fried. That wasn't amateur work. They'd used a localized EMP device, precision-tuned, small radius, likely disguised in a ceiling panel. He knew the kind. He'd used the kind. That meant this wasn't a heist, it was an operation. And the moment he realized that, Caleb changed objectives. No longer escape, no longer assess. Neutralize. He tapped his watch. Nothing. Tapped again. Dead. He took a deep breath. "All right," he murmured. "Let's dance." Inside the Vault Operations Center, a young man named Drew sat frozen beneath a steel workstation, tears pooling in his eyes. He was 26, had a fiancée, had a dog named Murphy. He'd joined Hawthorne as an IT specialist 3 months ago. Thought he'd be working with secure encryption and digital forensics. Now all he could hear were boots. Heavy ones, getting closer. He clutched the silent walkie he hadn't let go of since it squawked with a single calm voice. "Stay low. I'm coming." He wanted to believe it wasn't a lie. On floor 15, one of the armed intruders kicked open a stairwell door. "Clear," he called. No movement. Another voice came through the comms. "North corridor secured. Proceeding to vault stairwell." But before he could move, something shifted behind him. It was a sound so subtle most ears would have missed it, a faint clink, like metal brushing metal. He turned. No one was there. He stepped back, and a cord looped tight around his throat, yanking him off balance and into the shadows. No scream, just the sound of him hitting the floor, unconscious. Caleb dragged the body out of sight, stripped the man's headset, and slipped it on. Static. Then Delta 6 confirm status. Caleb clicked once, then twice. A pause. Copy. Proceeding to secondary. He smiled. Still speaks the same language, he muttered. On floor 20, Diana Voss had been zip-tied and dragged into the center of the boardroom with the rest of her executive team. Glass crunched under boots. The intruders moved methodically, checking for threats that didn't exist. At least, not yet. One of them stopped and stared at Diana. "You're the CEO." She met his gaze unflinching. "And you're wearing stolen gloves." He grabbed her hair and pulled her upright. "Smart mouth." "I run this building," she said through clenched teeth. "You don't scare me." He leaned in close. "You should be scared of who sent us, not me." That was when she saw it, a symbol etched into the side of his weapons receiver. It looked oddly familiar, a 7-pointed star. Her stomach dropped. Not because she recognized it, but because she'd seen something just like it before, on the Janitor. Caleb moved like smoke through the back hallways, descending into the security server floor. He knew the layout. Every panel, every blind spot. He slipped into the access junction and began rerouting power through a hardened maintenance conduit, one the blueprints didn't list anymore. Something old. Analog. Before firewalls and remote access. He restored power to one-line checkpoint broadcast. He flicked the switch. A hum came to life. Inside the vault control room, Drew's walkie buzzed again. Then came that voice, low, calm, gravel, warm. "All non-combatants, stay low, stay silent. If you hear boots, do not run. If you hear my voice, you're safe. To the intruders listening, you came here for the wrong reasons. You picked the wrong building. And you woke up the wrong man." Drew's mouth fell open. Across 4 floors, radios squawked, then fried into static. A beat. Then another explosion rocked the lower stairwell, smoke debris confusion. A new voice came over the attacker's channel. "Delta 6 is offline. Delta 5's feed is gone. Who's in the building unknown. Possibly internal. Name silence." Then, Caleb Shaw. Someone cursed. Loud. Desperate. "Are you telling me that Caleb Shaw is here?" The response was grim. "I think we just inherited a ghost." Back on the executive floor, Diana's eyes tracked every movement. The man holding her was distracted now, arguing into his headset. She leaned toward Martin. "Do you remember that janitor?" Martin blinked. "The tattoo guy?" "Yes. What about him?" She stared through the glass wall into the smoke-filled hallway beyond. "He's not a janitor." "What the hell is a janitor doing on encrypted military comms?" The question exploded inside the tactical earpiece of the lead intruder, codename Wren, who stood now at the edge of the 20th floor server room, rifle-clenched jaw locked. His breath fogged behind his visor, a thin sheen of sweat forming beneath his black helmet. Wren turned to his second. "Run facial ID on every floor staff again. Scrub security footage going back a month. Find me that voice." But, deep down, he already knew. There was only one man who moved like that. One man who ghosted through buildings as if walls were optional. And if it was him, then this wasn't a job anymore. This was war. Diana sat motionless in the boardroom, hands still zip-tied, mind racing. The name Caleb Shaw meant nothing to her professionally, but emotionally. Something flickered. The tattoo. The way he looked at the vents, not the floors. The way he never flinched when others mocked him. The way he didn't try to belong because people like that never needed to. She leaned toward Kevin, still trembling beside her. "Where does the janitor keep his things?" she whispered. Kevin blinked, confused. What?" "His locker. Where, Sub-level. Maintenance wing." Why, Diana didn't answer. She didn't have to. She was beginning to see the whole picture, and suddenly she wasn't scared anymore. She was intrigued. On floor 8, smoke curled through the hallway like a question mark spilling from a disabled circuit box. The lights flickered back for a second, long enough for a lone figure to step out of the haze. Caleb. He moved like a shadow with purpose, not running, not creeping, just knowing. Every step placed with surgical clarity. In his hand was a zip-sealed pack of thermite gel pilfered from the attacker's own kit. He pressed it against a sealed mag-lock door labeled Vault Corridor. Secured access only, then backed into cover. The gel ignited with a low hiss. The door didn't just open, it surrendered. Inside the vault corridor, 2 armed intruders turned at the sound. One raised his weapon. Too slow. Caleb hit the first man with the blunt edge of a repurposed wrench he'd turned into a baton. The strike was fast, precise base of the skull. He crumpled. The second fired. Muzzle flash lit the narrow space. Caleb dropped low, spun beneath the shot, and came up with the wrench again, this time striking the rifle's magazine release. The clip dropped to the floor. 2 more hits. Silence. He stood over them, chest rising slowly. One of the men stirred. Weak, afraid. "You're dead," he rasped. "We saw the footage." "Rouen." Shadow 9 didn't make it out. Caleb crouched beside him, voice low. "Rouen took everything from me," he said, "but I'm still breathing. You know what that makes me?" The man didn't answer. Caleb leaned in closer. "It makes me your worst mistake." Then he pressed the man's own earpiece, whispered into it, "2 down. Your move." Back in the command center, Wren clenched his fists. "This isn't possible," one of the techs muttered. "He's not in the system. No record, no clearance." Wren hissed through his teeth. "That's because his record was burned. He's not supposed to exist." Another voice broke in female quiet. "Diana Voss." "You're chasing a ghost," she said, standing now with her chin raised despite the restraints. "And I think you know it." Wren turned toward her. "You're awfully calm for someone one wrong move from dying." Diana tilted her head. "If he's who I think he is, you're the one who should be scared." On floor 3, Caleb reached a security access panel behind an old elevator maintenance shaft. He tapped a sequence with the trembling fingers, one he hadn't used in over a decade. A hidden panel clicked open, revealing a rusted drawer sealed with a biometric lock. He placed his palm against the reader. It took 3 seconds. Click. Inside was a sealed black box. Compact. Heavy. Etched on the side was the same symbol that lived on his forearm. A single eye inside a 7-pointed star. He opened it. Inside, a sidearm. Lightweight, untraceable. A communication bypass chip. And a folded ID card. The photo was old. He barely recognized the face. Agent C. Shaw, Sentinel Echo Program, status, Black Active, Level 0 Access. He stared at it for a moment, then slid it into his pocket. At that exact moment, a new figure entered the building from the underground garage, unarmed in civilian clothes, with a calmness that unnerved the local law enforcement stationed outside. He showed no badge, only a card with a silver crest. The officer in charge took one look and stepped aside. The man was led to the mobile operations van set up beside the building. Inside, he pulled up the internal schematics. "Has the breach been contained?" asked the tactical coordinator. The man didn't answer. He just pointed to one name on a personnel report. "Who's that?" the tech asked. "Caleb Shaw," he replied. "You'll want to give him room. Why?" He looked up, eyes sharp. "Because the last time someone got in his way, we had to shut down a continent for 3 days." Back inside, Diana was marched into the hallway under close guard. One of the intruders grunted, "Time to move." "She's priority 1. As they passed the stairwell, she looked at the wall and froze. There, etched in faint charcoal against the off-white paint, was a mark, a symbol, the same symbol she saw on the janitor's arm, the same one on the intruder's weapon, the same one now etched into her memory. Her guard noticed her stare. "You know what that means," he sneered. She turned to him. "Yes," she said. "It means you're already losing." Caleb re-entered the service corridor radio pressed to his ear. He heard the chatter, heard the panic, heard the name Shaw spoken like a warning. Good. Let them feel it. He paused at a corner, checked his magazine, then checked the door across from him. A heavy steel blast door marked Executive Subsafe. Access restricted. Behind it, hostages. And Diana. He exhaled once. Steady, quiet, then stepped forward. Because sometimes the world forgets the ones who disappear into the background. And sometimes those are the exact men who save it. Not for glory, not for revenge, but because they made a promise a long time ago to stand when no one else could, and now it was time to keep it. Caleb Shaw sat alone in the dim light of the sublevel corridor, back pressed to the cold wall, shoulder throbbing from the earlier fight. His breathing was steady now, methodical. But his eyes, those quiet, haunted eyes, stared down at the open ID card in his lap like it was a ghost that had finally caught up with him. Agent C. Shaw. Sentinel Echo. Black Active. Level 0. He hadn't seen that name in years. Not like that. He traced the edge of the card with his thumb as if he needed to remind himself it was real, that he had once been something else. Someone else. Above him, distant footsteps echoed through the service stairwell. The enemy was regrouping, searching, afraid. They should be. But Caleb wasn't moving yet. Not because of strategy, because of memory. It had been 9 years since Rouen, a remote compound buried in the canyons of Turkmenistan. A mission blacker than night. Operation Night Glass. 7 in 3 out. He remembered the smell of sand burned by gunpowder, the weight of his fallen team leader in his arms, and most of all he remembered the call that never came, the evac bird that never showed. They were left behind, sacrificed, and he made a choice that night, to live. But when he returned, there was no debrief, no medals, just silence, files erased, status deceased. Caleb didn't argue. He simply walked away. Back in the present, he tucked the ID back into his pocket and stood. The pain in his shoulder was sharper now, but pain had never stopped him. He pulled a thin, sealed packet from the lining of his janitor cart. Inside, an old photo, faded and creased. A woman and a boy, his wife, his son. He closed his eyes. "I'll finish this," he whispered. "Then I'll come find you." Elsewhere in the building, Diana Voss sat alone in the secured executive holding room, her wrists still bound, her mind racing faster than her heart. What she had seen on the stairwell wall, what she now knew, shifted everything. The janitor wasn't a ghost. He was a relic with teeth, and he was inside the building. She looked around at the hostages beside her, some still sobbing, some frozen, none with any fight left, except her. "Tell me you've got a plan," Martin Reyes muttered 2 seats away, voice low, snide. Diana turned slowly. "My plan is to hope the man you all ignored has one." Martin sneered. "You think this guy what some covert Rambo he's going to take down a whole strike team?" She leaned in, close voice, soft and scalpel sharp. "I think the kind of man who lets you laugh at him every day and still shows up to do his job is the kind of man who doesn't need you to believe in him. He just needs you to stay out of his way." Martin had no answer. On floor 7, Caleb slipped through a maintenance duct, bypassing 2 armed guards sweeping the hallway. His every movement was fluid quiet with the kind of instinct that comes from not thinking, just doing. He dropped into a boiler room, crouched beneath a tangle of old steam pipes. He tapped into a manual breaker panel and rerouted power to one line only. Subsafe lockdown override. He whispered under his breath, "Come on." Still got fingers crossed from 08. The light flicked green. Above the door, locks clicked open. Diana heard it, the small metallic clack of the magnetic door behind her disengaging. She turned. So did the guards. One stepped forward, raising his weapon. Too late. The lights above the doorway blew out in a flash, plunging the room into darkness. And from that blackness came motion. 2 quick, muffled sounds. Thud. Crack. Then silence. When the emergency light flickered back to life, both guards were down, and in the doorway stood Caleb, breathing slow. Eyes locked on Diana. "You okay?" he asked, voice calm. She blinked. "You're late." He allowed a faint smile. "Wasn't on the schedule." Then without another word, he pulled a multi-tool from his pocket and cut through her restraints. He moved fast, but never rushed. She rubbed her wrists. "How did you even—" "I was here when they built this place," he replied. "They just didn't know it." They moved through the back hallways together, Diana close behind. He handed her a small radio earpiece. "Stay on channel 4. Don't speak unless I say so." She nodded, slipping it in. "You have a name, or should I just keep calling you the Janitor?" He paused at the corner of the stairwell. Caleb. She waited. That's it. That's all that still matters. They descended 2 levels, ducking behind cleaning stations and equipment closets until they reached a shuttered access panel. Caleb pried it open, revealing a crawl space just wide enough to fit through. He gestured. This takes you to the east exit tunnel. You'll be 5 blocks away by the time they figure it out. Diana didn't move. You're not coming. He shook his head. Not yet. They're not done. You're injured. I'm alive. She stared at him. Why are you really here? Caleb. He looked at her then. Really looked. And something broke behind his eyes. Because people like them took everything from me, and people like you let it happen. She stiffened. Excuse me. You didn't pull the trigger, he said, but you made a world where this could happen, a world where men like me disappear and no one asks why. There was no venom in his tone, just weariness. Diana said nothing. Then, softer, he added, but I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to make sure they don't disappear anyone else today. A long pause. Then she nodded. I'll be at that exit, she said. But if you walk out of this, I expect you to explain everything. He smiled faintly. I'm better with a mop than conversation. She took a breath, turned toward the crawl space, then looked back once more. Thank you. His answer was a whisper. Don't thank me yet. As she vanished into the tunnel, Caleb turned and faced the dark hallway once more. Alone again. Just how it started. But not how it would end. He tightened the strap on his shoulder harness, reloaded, and walked back into the storm he never asked for. Because sometimes the men we ignore are the ones built for the fight no one else sees coming, and sometimes the past doesn't come to haunt us, it comes to finish what we left behind. The echo of Diana's footsteps faded behind the crawlspace panel. Caleb stood alone in the half-lit maintenance corridor, staring at the darkness ahead. His shoulders still throbbed. The scrape across his ribs burned every time he moved. But pain wasn't the enemy right now. Time was. And the fact that Wren, the man in charge of this siege, had just changed tactics. Caleb had seen the shift. The patterns were off. The last patrol moved in a tighter triangle. The footfalls were heavier. No more casual radio chatter. They weren't just hunting anymore. They were reacting. And that meant they knew he was close. Good. Let them. On the 14th floor, Wren slammed his fist into the wall-mounted comms terminal, cracking the plastic housing. One of his lieutenant's sharp eyes, callsign Vox, stood nearby, arms crossed. He's thinning the outer ring, Vox said quietly. 3, gone in 20 minutes. No sound. No backup. Wren wiped sweat from his brow, smearing a streak of ash across his glove. He's not improvising. He's bleeding us. Could be bluff. Could be he's alone. No, Wren snapped. He's not bluffing. He's Shaw. Vox tilted his head. Then we need to cut the game. Wren stared at him. We bait him, Vox said. A long pause, then Wren grinned. The hostage room was quiet now, too quiet. Kevin Lang sat against the wall, eyes closed, muttering prayers he hadn't said since childhood. Martin Reyes sat beside him, breathing through his shirt like it would filter the fear. Others wept in silence. Until a voice broke through the speaker, calm, clear. Calculated. This is Command Unit. There has been a breach. One of our own has been compromised. He is armed and dangerous. The hostages froze. To ensure your safety, we will relocate you to secured positions. Do not resist. Do not speak. Non-compliance will be met with force. The door clicked. 2 armed men entered, but something was wrong. The way they moved, too cautious, too tense. They were afraid. That was when Martin whispered, "They're not moving us for our safety. They're moving us because of him." Kevin blinked, because of who Martin's voice dropped to a hush, the janitor. Meanwhile, 3 floors below, Caleb crouched over a disabled operative still breathing barely. A cold draft seeped in from the stairwell behind him. He clicked the comm link from the man's collar and whispered, "Wren." A pause, then static, then a voice. "Well, look who finally came home." Caleb didn't smile. "I didn't come for you, no. Ren replied. You came for redemption. Same as always. You don't know me. I know enough. I know Rouen. I know the body count. I know what they buried and who they blamed. You're not a ghost, Shaw. You're just the last man standing in a room no one wants to remember. Caleb's voice dropped to a whisper. Then why are you still talking? A beat of silence. Then Ren chuckled. Because you still care, and that means you still bleed. Diana moved through the east tunnel with controlled urgency. The passage was tight, low-ceilinged, lined with exposed steel and decades of dust. Her heels clicked until she kicked them off. She reached a security hatch marked Emergency Exit, Manual Release. She turned the wheel. Locked. She tried again. No movement. Then, behind her, came a voice. Now, why would you leave before the finale? She turned. Vox. Alone. Rifle slung. But the look in his eyes was feral. He stepped closer. You think he's saving you? You think Shaw is anything more than a broken weapon still swinging because no one told him to stop? Diana stood her ground. I think he's the only one in this building willing to bleed for someone else. Vox smirked. Then you haven't seen him break yet. He raised his rifle, and that's when something behind him moved. Fast, a blur of motion. Vox spun too slow. Caleb crashed into him like a hurricane, one arm driving into the weapon, the other twisting the man's center of gravity. They hit the wall hard. Metal cracked. Sparks flew. Caleb didn't speak. He just hit him. Once, twice, 3 times, until Vox slid to the floor, unmoving. Caleb turned to Diana, panting. You all right? She nodded. You always arrive with that kind of timing. He wiped blood from his knuckle. Only when it matters. Together, they ascended the old freight stairwell, tight shadowed winding toward the upper floors. The plan wasn't perfect. But there was no time for perfect. Diana followed close behind. For the first time, she noticed how Caleb moved not just with purpose, but with weight. Like every step cost him something. Like he wasn't just walking through a building. He was walking through memories. You okay? She asked softly. He didn't look back. I've been worse. She hesitated. What happened to them? He stopped, turned. To who? Your team. Caleb's voice dropped to a near whisper. They trusted the wrong people, got left behind. 3 made it out, 1 survived, and the others, his jaw clenched, buried in sand, alongside the truth. Diana looked away. I'm sorry. He nodded once. So am I. At the 18th floor junction, they paused. Caleb glanced at her. You don't have to come. Diana crossed her arms. You think I'm going to crawl through 2 miles of ducks and let you have all the fun? He almost smiled. Almost. They breached the floor. Gunfire erupted. Caleb moved first, dragging Diana behind a stone pillar. 2 hostiles flanked the hallway. He tossed a broken flash strip rigged with a maintenance LED and a compact battery. It popped, blinding. He moved through the light like it was air. 3 shots, 2 down. Silence. Diana stared at him. You were never a janitor. He looked back, finally letting the silence stretch. No, he said, but I needed to be someone invisible, before I could remember how to be useful. As they reached the end of the corridor, a steel blast door sealed before them. Behind it, Ren's voice crackled to life over the intercom. Welcome home, Shaw. Caleb stared at the door. No more hiding, he said. Diana stepped beside him. Then open it. He turned to her, voice low. Final. This ends tonight. Behind his eyes, the storm began to rise. The blast door groaned behind them, steel echoing like a war drum in retreat. Caleb led Diana down the maintenance stairwell, his hand still bleeding from the skirmish with Vox. Diana moved in rhythm behind him, boots scuffing concrete, eyes never straying from his back. She didn't ask what came next, she knew better now. Caleb Shaw wasn't a man who predicted outcomes. He survived them. The building rumbled. A muffled boom shook dust from overhead vents. Was that? Diana began. Detonation charge, Caleb said flatly. Timed small yield. A distraction. They're preparing for exfil. You think they're giving up? No. They're buying chaos. On the 7th floor, smoke bled through the ventilation shafts, a slow, creeping fog that crawled along the baseboards and curled under doorways like a living thing. It wasn't thick enough to choke yet, but it blurred the edges of everything. In the security operations room, 2 hostiles watched the surveillance feeds fuzz and die one by one. "This was supposed to be surgical," one of them muttered. "In and out 20 minutes. We're on hour 2. The other didn't answer. He was staring at a paused feed. Caleb's face caught mid-motion, dragging Diana out of a blast zone. His lips moved Sentinel Echo. And then the feed cut to black. Outside, the Chicago police perimeter tightened. SWAT vans lined the street like a wall of steel. Above a chopper hovered in lazy circles, its spotlight scanning glass and smoke. But inside the building, they still had no signal. Lieutenant Ramirez stood at the mobile command unit, frustrated. "They've jammed every line but one, some kind of analog pulse bouncing off old maintenance channels. Can't trace it. Can you hear anything on it?" asked the sergeant beside her. Ramirez adjusted the receiver. Then came a voice. "This is Shaw. I have eyes on the primary hostage. Proceeding to sublevel emergency conduit. Advise no entry." The sergeant blinked. "Who the hell is—" Shaw Ramirez stared at the radio. "The janitor," she said. Back inside, Caleb and Diana reached the base of the stairwell that led to the eastern mezzanine, an old, disused corridor that hadn't seen a light bulb change in over a decade. The air was thicker here, tinged with smoke and decay. Diana covered her mouth with her sleeve. "This is your shortcut." "No," Caleb said, checking corners. "This is my memory." "What does that mean?" He paused, letting the silence stretch. "This is where I came after my last op," he said. "Before I took this job. I slept here my first week. No lights, no questions." Diana looked around the claustrophobic space. "And now we're going back into it. Sometimes the only way forward is through the place you tried to forget." They reached the mezzanine junction. The corridor ahead was thick with low smoke rolling silent, deceiving. Caleb knelt, touching the floor. Heat's rising. They rigged something upstairs, maybe a burn, to trigger evacuation protocols. "You think they're trying to flush us out?" He shook his head. "They're not after escape anymore. They're after leverage." Diana tightened her jaw. "The data center." Caleb nodded once. "They know you're here," she said. "They know you're the threat now. Then they'll dig in, use everything they have left. What do we do?" He looked at her, really looked this time. "I finish what I started." In the hostage chamber, the air had grown thin. Kevin Lang coughed violently, eyes watering. The vents hissed smoke now, and the heat pushed sweat from every pore. The hostages began to stir, panic rising again. Then a sound. Not boots, not guns. A knock. 3 soft taps against the steel frame of the duct. Then a whisper. "Everyone, stay quiet. I need you down." Faces covered. Martin recognized the voice. Rough, low, steady. It wasn't a soldier's voice. It was the janitor's. Moments later, a panel popped loose behind the storage shelves, and Caleb's face emerged half-covered in soot and sweat. He held a maintenance-grade fire suppressant, a short-range EMP flare, and a tiny fragment of resolve carved from hell itself. He signaled to Martin. "2, coming back in. I'll take the first. You distract the second." Martin paled. "I'm an accountant." "You're also a father," Caleb said softly. "You know what fear is. That means you know how to fake bravery." Martin's eyes shimmered, and then he nodded. It happened fast, and the door burst open. 2 masked gunmen entered, coughing through the haze, weapons raised. Martin stood up. "Hey!" he shouted. "What did you do with the guy with the tattoo?" "Huh?" They turned, and from behind the shelves Caleb moved, like a shadow, and the first man didn't even scream. The second turned too late. 2 strikes. Then silence. Caleb locked the door and turned to the hostages. "Stay down. Help's coming." He moved toward the exit. Diana was waiting outside, holding her breath. When she saw his silhouette appear through the fog, her chest finally eased. "You good?" she asked. He nodded. For now. But overhead, a tremor shook the east corridor. Fire alarms blared. A voice echoed through the old PA system hijacked. Wren's voice. "This building has no heroes," it said, "only ghosts, and ghosts burn like the rest." The hallway ahead of Caleb lit red. The next floor was rigged, and they were going right into it. The emergency corridor was silent, unnaturally so. Concrete walls loomed on either side, stained with decades of rust and neglect. The air hung damp-heavy with the scent of mildew and machinery oil. Somewhere above them, the sound of gunfire and crumbling infrastructure had gone quiet. Too quiet. Caleb led the way, flashlight low. His steps cautious but determined. Diana followed close behind. Soaked, shivering, her designer blouse clinging to her like a second skin. Her once perfect hair was matted to her neck, streaked with ash and water. She didn't complain. She hadn't said a word since the last door slammed shut behind them. He finally broke the silence. "We've got 2 more chambers before the central elevator shaft. After that, straight down to the control junction." Diana nodded, her voice hoarse. "And that's where we stop this no." Caleb didn't look back. "That's where we finish it." They reached the first gate, a rusted bulkhead with a red wheel lock. Caleb tested it. It groaned, then gave. The corridor beyond sloped downward into shadow, into silence. Then came the smell, and the sound. Drip, drip, drip. Diana stepped to the edge. Her foot sank into ankle-deep water. She froze. This wasn't in the plan, she whispered. Caleb scanned the corridor. The reservoirs overflowed. Because of the explosion? Probably. He stepped forward, testing the depth. "Water pressure shouldn't be too high. We stay close to the left wall." "How deep?" He paused. "Unknown." She hesitated. Caleb turned to face her, the flashlight beam catching the fear just beneath her calm. "You don't have to do this," he said. She met his eyes. "If I stop now, they win." Caleb nodded once, and they stepped into the dark. At first, the water rose to their shins, then their knees. By the halfway point, it was waist-deep and frigid. The flashlight's beam danced on the rippling surface like a ghost. Diana gritted her teeth, each step harder than the last. The floor sloped again. Chest deep. Then neck. She gasped. "Caleb, stay with me," he said, voice steady. "Breathe slow. No sudden moves." "I can't." Her voice broke. "I can't see the end." "You don't need to. Just focus on me." A flash of panic surged through her eyes. "I don't swim," she choked. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You don't have to." In one swift motion, Caleb wrapped one arm around her waist and began pulling her through the water with strong, controlled strokes. Her arms clung to his shoulders. Her breath came in ragged bursts against his neck. The world narrowed to the sound of water, the rhythm of his heartbeat, and his voice. "I had a son," he said quietly. "Name's Luke, 10 years old." Diana blinked. "You never mentioned him." Caleb didn't stop moving. "Didn't think I'd need to. What happened to him? He's alive. With my sister. I haven't seen him in a year." She clung tighter. "Why? Because I didn't think I was safe to be around." A pause. "I ran from everything. From him. From what I did. From who I was." She swallowed hard. And now he stopped. They had reached a shallow ledge, just enough to stand. He set her down gently, both of them soaked to the bone. "Now," he said, catching his breath, "now I'm fighting to be someone he can look up to again." They pushed through the final emergency door. The hallway on the other side was narrow and dry, lined with emergency lights glowing faint red. Diana slumped against the wall, breathing hard. Caleb checked the schematic burned into his memory. "Control panels 100 feet ahead." She nodded, but her voice was soft. "You didn't have to tell me about your son." Caleb paused. "I did." "Why?" He met her eyes, no mask this time. No shadows, just a man bleeding and broken trying to do one thing right. "Because I needed you to know what I'm protecting." She stepped closer. "And you think I'm worth protecting too?" A long silence. Then Caleb spoke. "You're the only person in that building who didn't freeze when hell broke loose. You didn't wait to be saved. You moved. You acted. You believed me when no one else did." He looked away, voice quieter. "That matters." Diana stared at him. Then softly, "I don't think anyone's ever said that to me." Another silence. And then, a distant bang echoed through the tunnel. Ren was getting closer. They reached the final control panel, a rusted console behind a steel mesh cage. Caleb pried open the casing and exposed the wiring beneath. His fingers moved fast, reconnecting the cut relay to override the security lockdown. Diana watched, then stepped forward. "Teach me." He looked up. "What?" "Teach me what to do, in case you don't make it." He stared at her, then nodded. Wordlessly, he guided her hands to the relay, showed her where to twist which wire to watch. She listened, absorbed, learned. The moment felt like more than survival. It felt like passing the torch. A code blinked on the console. System engaged. "Done," he said. But before they could celebrate, the console screen flickered. A voice broke through the static. "Shaw, you're getting closer, but so am I. Ren," his voice now ice. "You've run out of floors to hide in." Caleb's jaw clenched. "I'm not hiding. You're delaying the inevitable. But let's not pretend this is for the hostages anymore. This is about us." Caleb stared at the screen, unflinching. "No," he said. "This is about finishing what you started." They turned from the console. Diana reached for his hand. This time, he let her take it. She whispered, "Whatever comes next, don't do it alone." He didn't answer, but he didn't let go. They moved toward the final tunnel, the walls trembling from the approaching storm. The war wasn't over, but the fear no longer owned them. The blast door hissed open. The air that rushed out was stale and cold, like a tomb that had been sealed for years. Caleb stepped through first low and alert, sweeping the entry with a veteran's precision. Diana followed her breath, shallow, every nerve alert. The floor was dim, no overhead lighting, only flickers from damaged emergency strips casting pulses of red along the walls. This wasn't just a control center. It was a bunker. Rows of steel terminals. A wall of live feed monitors now frozen. And at the far end, a silhouette standing before a large data server lit in soft green. Ren. He didn't turn. He just spoke. "You always had a talent for surviving things you weren't meant to." Caleb didn't answer. Ren turned then slowly clean-cut mid-40s eyes sharp with the kind of clarity only obsession could sharpen. The man looked like he'd walked straight from a war and never left. "You look older," Ren said. "You look the same," Caleb replied flatly, "which means you never stopped." Ren smiled cold. "Some of us couldn't afford to." Diana's hand hovered near a dropped sidearm wedged between cables. Caleb subtly raised 2 fingers. "Stay put." She froze. "I warned them," Ren said, pacing, "about keeping bloodhounds on a leash, but they thought you were finished. Just a name in a closed file. A janitor. That was the idea," Caleb said. "No medals, no vengeance, just peace." Ren scoffed. "Peace. You think scrubbing floors absolves you, that your silence kept them safe." His eyes narrowed. "We buried 9 good men in Rouen because of your call." Caleb's voice lowered. "And I've carried all 9. Every day. But you came back from that mission different, Ren. You didn't mourn them. You turned them into a flag you wave when you want power." That struck. Ren's expression twitched. "I wave them," he whispered, "because no one else will. Because this world forgets too fast. Especially people like you, who vanish and let it rot." He raised a hand. And behind Caleb the server bank groaned. It wasn't just storage, it was access. "I knew you'd come here eventually," Ren said. "That tattoo isn't just ink, it's a lock, a code. The last piece of Sentinel Echo's archive lives in you and you didn't even know it." Diana's eyes widened. Caleb did not move. "You built all this to chase ghosts," No Ren said. "To rebuild something better. You think this is about a heist? No. This building, this vault, the timing, everything was to bait you, to wake you up." He stepped forward. "And now that you're here, I can finally end the program with the only man who survived it." Caleb dropped his stance a half-inch. Not fear. Readiness. Then the first shot rang out. Ren's backup emerged from the side chamber, 2 operatives with tactical gear moving fast. Caleb yanked Diana down just as the glass behind them shattered. He rolled into cover and fired 2 shots. Clean, one attacker dropped. The other advanced, spraying rounds toward the server column. Sparks exploded. Smoke billowed. Diana crawled behind a toppled console, blood running from a shallow graze on her forearm. Caleb charged. He ducked under a swing, tackled the second attacker to the ground, and disabled him with a precision strike to the throat. No hesitation, no room for mercy. Then silence, except for Wren's slow clap from the far end. "You always were efficient." Caleb's chest rose and fell. "You always talk too much." Wren pulled his jacket back, revealing a compact detonator. Diana saw it first. "Caleb." He turned. Wren's thumb hovered. "This isn't about winning," Wren said. "It's about making sure no one gets what they buried. If I can't build it, no one will. You pull that," Caleb said, voice steady, "and we all die." Wren's smile was sad. "No, you walk away. I end this. You disappear again. And she lives." He nodded toward Diana. A beat. Then Caleb did something unexpected. He stepped forward and placed his weapon down. "I'm tired of running." Wren froze. "I'm tired of carrying the dead, of hiding behind mops and boiler rooms." "You want my legacy," Caleb said, taking another step. "Here it is. I'm still standing, and I'm still choosing what's right." He reached his hand out slowly, palm open. "You can still stop this," Caleb said softly. "You don't have to burn everything down just because you lost your compass." Wren's face cracked just slightly. For a flash, the soldier underneath showed. Then he blinked and pressed the trigger. Click, nothing. Caleb moved. Too fast. He closed the gap, struck Wren's arm upward, dislodged the detonator. It flew across the room, clattering harmlessly into the server racks. They fought. Old soldiers, familiar enemies. Not a brawl in unraveling. Fists, elbows, knee to gut, shoulder to steel. Caleb absorbed a punch that split his brow. Wren slammed him into a terminal glass, cutting skin. But Caleb didn't falter. He remembered Ruan. He remembered June. He remembered his son's face the day he swore he'd never raise a hand again unless it was to protect someone who couldn't. And so Caleb struck once, twice, final. Wren dropped, breathing but out cold. Silence reclaimed the room. Diana rushed over, hands trembling. "You're bleeding." Caleb exhaled. "Just enough to remind me I'm alive." She helped him sit. "You came here for redemption," she said. "Did you find it?" He looked at her, truly looked for the first time. "No, but I found something better. What's that?" He glanced at the server, the ashes of secrets, the absence of glory, a reason to stop hiding. Far above them, the first breach team from SWAT blew through the stairwell doors. Sirens echoed. Radios crackled. The building finally was coming back to life. But down here, in the eye of the storm, Caleb Shaw was still. Still breathing. Still standing. And still choosing. Not vengeance, not legacy, just what was right. The freight elevator groaned open on the main floor of Hawthorne Trust. Smoke still curled from vents. Emergency lights strobed along the edges of shattered marble. Dozens of hostages sat in loose rows, guarded now not by fear, but by SWAT officers checking pulses and calming nerves. Then came the silence. As Caleb stepped out of the elevator, every pair of eyes turned. Not because they knew who he was, but because they could feel it, the weight he carried. The way his presence changed the room, not loud, not proud, just steady. Diana followed close behind, her wrist wrapped with a torn strip of Caleb's sleeve. She limped slightly, but her eyes never left him. "Caleb," she said softly, "they'll have questions." He nodded. "Let them." The first to approach was SWAT Captain Jensen, a tall man with hard eyes and a Kevlar vest still dusted in drywall. He motioned his team to lower their weapons. "You the one who neutralized Wren?" he asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. Didn't do it for credit. Jensen stared. "I'm not offering a medal." "Good. A beat." Then Jensen's voice softened. We reviewed internal footage on the way down, your entry, the tunnels, the hand-to-hand takedowns, the flash strip in the East Corridor. He held up a tablet. On screen, paused in grainy black and white, was a frame Caleb kneeling over a hostage, shielding them from gunfire with his own body. Jensen turned the screen around. My team recognized that mark. Caleb didn't have to look. The tattoo on his left shoulder partially torn, bloodied, but unmistakable. The crest of Sentinel Echo, a special unit that no longer officially existed. Jensen stepped back a pace, then did something that froze the entire lobby. He stood tall, then slowly, without a word, raised his right hand. A full, solemn salute. Not to a janitor, but to a warrior who had never asked to be remembered. For a moment, no one moved. Then another agent followed suit, and another. A third, an older paramedic, stood quietly, hand over heart, tears shining in her eyes. Diana stepped closer, watching it unfold. "You didn't need a parade," she whispered. Caleb's voice was low. "I just needed to know it mattered." Outside, the scene had already exploded. News vans, police barriers, a sea of cell phones and microphones and flashing cameras. The chaos of curiosity. But as Caleb and Diana stepped through the cracked glass doors together, what greeted them wasn't just noise. It was a wall of people, first responders, families of the hostages, even strangers parting to let them pass. Not because they knew his name, but because something about the way he walked, the quiet steadiness of him, made them move. A young boy broke free from the crowd, no older than 10, holding a sketch pad. He ran up to Caleb, breathless. "Sir, are you the one who saved my dad?" Caleb looked down. The kid's hands were shaking. His pad showed a pencil drawing of a man in a janitor uniform, with wings. Caleb crouched. "I'm not a hero," he said gently. The boy frowned. "But—" "You tried. Doesn't that count?" Caleb took a breath. Then reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a rusted gear from the basement generator etched with years of grime and wear. He placed it in the boy's hand. "It does," Caleb said, "but keep this. It reminds me that quiet things still hold things together." Later, as dusk fell over Chicago, the chaos dimmed. Ambulances drove off. Reports began to circulate. But Caleb and Diana sat on the building's back steps watching the sun disappear behind the city skyline. "You know they're going to want a press statement," she said. "I have nothing to say," he replied. "You don't have to tell them who you are, just why you did it." He looked at her, and for the first time his defenses dropped, not shattered, just set down. "I did it. Because someone had to. Because I've spent too many years hiding behind a mop pretending I wasn't made for more." Diana studied him. "And now I'm not hiding anymore." She smiled, tired but warm. "That's a good start." He looked at her, then away. "What about you?" she sighed. "I always thought I had to carry everything myself. Lead the board, protect the company, stay cold, stay sharp. But today I saw what it looks like when someone carries something not for power, but to protect." She paused. "I think I forgot how to trust. Until now." Caleb glanced sideways. "In me. In people like you." A breeze swept through the alley, stirring dust and the faint scent of burnt plastic. Then Diana leaned gently against his shoulder. They sat like that for a long time. No medals, no microphones, just silence. The kind that means something was healed not all at once, but enough. Enough to begin again. Across the city, in a dim-lit command center, a classified report closed on an encrypted screen. Subject, Caleb Shaw. Status, resurfaced actions. No detainment recommended. Recommendation, let him walk. Beside the note, a still frame played in loop, a man standing amid broken glass and firelight shielding strangers with nothing but his body. No uniform, no rank, just courage. The janitor had vanished again, but this time not to hide. This time he had nothing left to run from, only something to walk toward. The fluorescent lights in the maintenance corridor hummed softly, casting long shadows across the floor as Caleb Shaw pushed his mop bucket down the hallway, Same slow rhythm, same worn boots, same uniform with a faded name tag. If anyone had walked by just then, they would have thought nothing of the man cleaning up after the chaos. The bank had reopened just a week after the attack, as if the violence had been scrubbed away with enough polish and new paint. But some things couldn't be cleaned off the walls, and some names couldn't be forgotten. Footsteps echoed behind him, heels, sharp, intentional. Still mopping floors, Mr. Shaw, Diana Voss's voice was quieter than usual. Not cold, not sarcastic, just searching. Caleb didn't turn. He reached into the bucket, pulled out a clean cloth, and began wiping the corner of a vent as if it mattered. "Some messes don't finish cleaning themselves," he said. "Takes a little longer for the invisible ones." She stepped closer. Her blazer was crisp, her posture poised, but something in her face had softened. She wasn't the woman who once dismissed him in passing. She wasn't the woman who only saw walls and numbers. She had bled, feared, and survived, and in that survival she had seen. "You saved this entire building," she said gently. "You saved me." Caleb shook his head slowly. "I did what had to be done." "That's what people like you always say," she replied, "but we both know it's not that simple." Finally he turned. His eyes held the weight of too many years and too many battles, some fought in silence, some still raging inside. "I didn't do it for recognition," he said, "or glory. I don't need a medal. I just didn't want anyone else to carry what I've carried." Diana hesitated, then stepped forward and placed a manila folder on the nearby bench. "This is a job offer," she said. "Not for janitorial work. It's a security advisory position with federal clearance. Discreet. You'd be doing what you're clearly born to do with pay and dignity to match." Caleb looked at the folder but didn't reach for it. "I appreciate it," he said after a moment. "Truly, but I already have a job." "A job," she repeated, baffled. "Caleb, you could—" He cut her off with a gentle smile. "I fix things, I clean messes, and sometimes I watch the world move on from the shadows. That's enough." Diana's voice caught in her throat. She studied the man before her, the same man who had pulled her from a flooded sublevel, who had bled in silence to protect people who never even noticed him. And now he stood before her calm, steady, ready to disappear again. "You deserve peace," she whispered. "You deserve more than just fading back into the walls." "I have peace," he said, "right here." Then without warning she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was something deeper, a kind of reverence, a thank you too large for words. "I see you now," she murmured into his shoulder. He nodded against her temple. "That's enough." When they stepped apart, Diana gave him a small, sad smile. "You know, for a man who wants to disappear, you sure left a loud echo." He chuckled, a real quiet chuckle that hadn't left his chest in years. "Then maybe it's time folks start listening to the quiet ones." Later that morning, Caleb walked through the main lobby of the Hawthorne Trust building. The sunlight poured through the grand glass facade, casting golden beams across the floor. The place was humming with life again, employees chatting, phones ringing, footsteps clicking. But as Caleb passed, something happened. People stopped. One by one, they turned. There were no whispers, no snickers, no laughter about tattoos, just silence and acknowledgement. The young teller who once mocked his mop now gave a respectful nod. The security guard who barely remembered his name offered a firm, wordless salute. Even the boardroom assistant who once filmed him for laughs lowered her gaze and mouthed "thank you." Caleb kept walking, and as he passed through the atrium, sleeve rolled slightly back from pushing the bucket, the silver and black tattoo peeked out beneath the cuff. The eye within the star. Not just a symbol anymore. A memory. A warning. A legacy. He paused by the door, looked back once, not at the people but at the space. The building. The lives still breathing because of a janitor no one ever noticed. Diana appeared at the second-floor railing above, watching him go. She didn't call out. She just placed her hand on her heart and nodded. Caleb stepped into the sunlight, shoulders squared, head high. Not a hero seeking glory. Just a man who stayed. Just a man who did what was right. And so, sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest courage. Not for medals, not for applause, but because someone has to stay standing when the world begins to fall. If Caleb's story touched you, made you feel something, or reminded you not to judge too quickly, let me know. Where are you watching from? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you're someone who believes that kindness, courage, and quiet strength still matter in this world, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We've got many more stories just like this. Stories that heal, that move, that remind us of what we sometimes forget. Thank you truly for spending your time here. Until next time, stay kind, stay brave, stay human.